The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched upward like a cathedral made of light. Thousands of seats rose in circular tiers around a central platform, where speakers addressed the assembled representatives. Crystal pillars held floating screens that translated every word into 100 different languages. The air itself seemed to hum with the weight of decisions that shaped the fate of worlds. Supreme Commander Zorath of the Velari Dominion stood at the central platform. His scales gleamed dark purple under the artificial lights. His four eyes scanned the council members with barely hidden contempt. The Velari were warriors. They had conquered 12-star systems in 50 years. They had crushed species that dared to resist them, and now they had come to ask permission from these old fools. It was a formality, nothing more. The Velari Dominion requests expansion rights into the Orion Spur, Zorath announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. The region is sparsely populated. Only one species of any note occupies those stars. The humans, a young race, primitive. They have no empire, no conquered territories. They barely have a fleet worth mentioning. He paused and let his words sink in. We will take what we need. We extend this courtesy to the council only as a sign of respect for galactic law. The chamber fell silent. Zorath had expected murmurs of approval, perhaps some nervous objections from the weaker delegations. Instead, he saw something he did not expect. Fear. The ancient archivists, beings of pure energy who had existed since before most species learned to walk upright, flickered with agitation. The Quarren delegation, those small gray creatures who traded in information across the galaxy, exchanged worried glances. Even the Kree, a warrior race that the Velari respected, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The council speaker rose. She was of the Syrian, tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the light like a mirror. Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable warning. The council denies this request. Zora's eyes narrowed. On what grounds? Human space is protected territory, not by us, by them. The speaker folded her long fingers together. Supreme Commander, you are new to the galactic stage. The Velari have risen quickly, impressively. But there are things you do not know. Things you have not witnessed. I have witnessed the conquest of 12 systems. Zorath growled. I have witnessed the fall of the Morath Empire beneath our guns. What could I possibly need to witness about humans? The speaker did not flinch. Human ships are special. You would be wise to leave them alone. Laughter burst from Zorath before he could stop it. The sound bounced off the crystal pillars and faded into uncomfortable silence. No one else was laughing. Special, he repeated. I have seen their ships, small vessels, basic designs. They have no dreadnoughts, no planet crackers. They do not even maintain a proper military fleet. They use the same ships for exploration and defense. Yes, the speaker agreed. They do. Then what is special about them? They speaker sat down slowly. If you attack human space, you will find out. The council has given its answer. This session is concluded. Zorath stood frozen in disbelief as the representatives began to leave. Some of them looked at him with what he could only describe as pity. The mighty Velari, pied by traders and scholars and ancient relics. His clawed hands tightened into fists as he turned to leave. A small figure blocked his path. A Quarren, old even by their standards. His gray skin was wrinkled and spotted with age, but his black eyes held a sharpness that made Zor pause. Supreme Commander, the Koran said quietly, I am Ambassador Tellus. I have served on this council for 300 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched the birth of new civilizations and the death of old ones, and you wish to warn me about humans. Zoreth sneered. I wish to tell you a story. Tellus did not react to the mockery. 60 years ago, a Kree warlord named Varax decided that Earth would make a fine conquest. The humans had just begun exploring beyond their home system. They seemed weak, defenseless, easy prey. Zoreth crossed his arms. I have not heard of this Vorax. No, you would not have. Tells blinked slowly. He took 500 warships to Earth, the finest vessels that Kree had ever built. He expected a quick victory, a glorious conquest that would make his name immortal. What happened we do not know. Tellus let those words hang in the air. His fleet entered human space. They approached Earth, and then they simply stopped transmitting. For 3 days the CF heard nothing. They prepared a rescue mission. And then the survivors arrived. Zoreth felt a cold sensation crawling up his spine. He ignored it. Survivors. 12,000 Kree warriors packed into escape pods, drifting out of human space with a single message playing on repeat. Tellus leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. The message said, we do not want war, but we are ready for it. Do not come back. 500 ships, Zora said slowly, and the humans let them live. The humans always let them live. That is what makes them terrifying. Step back. I have delivered my warning, Supreme Commander. What you do with it is your choice. The old Koran walked away without another word. Zoreth returned to his flagship, the Dominant. Will, in a dark mood, his officers greeted him with eager questions about the council meeting. He silenced them with a wave of his hand and retreated to his private chambers. For a long time, he stared out the viewport at the stars. The Quarren story bothered him. 500 ships, defeated by a species with no military tradition. It seemed impossible, and yet the fear in that council chamber had been real. The archivists, beings who had seen the birth of stars, were afraid of humans, but fear could be a weapon too. Perhaps the humans had cultivated this myth deliberately. Perhaps they had planted these stories to protect themselves from species like the Velari. It was clever if true. Make yourself seem invincible, and your enemies will defeat themselves. Zorath smiled. He had not built an empire by believing in myths. He activated his communication console and connected to the Velari High Command. The faces of his fellow commanders appeared on the screen. They were hungry for expansion, hungry for conquest, hungry for the glory that came with crushing another species beneath their boots. The council has denied our request, Zoreth announced. Angry voices erupted from the screen. He let them rage for a moment before raising his hand. The council is old and weak. They fear change. They fear progress. They fear us. He let his words sink in. But we are the Velari. We do not ask permission. We take what is ours. The humans, one commander said. What of them? They are nothing, a young species playing at civilization. They have no fleet, no empire, no experience with real war. Zoreth's smile widened. The council has tried to frighten us with stories, ghost tales, but we are not children to be scared by shadows. Then We proceed, assemble the fleet 200 of our finest warships. We will take the human colony world of New Carthage. It is remote, poorly defended. An easy first victory that will announce our presence in the Orion Spur. The commanders roared their approval. Battle plans were drawn, supply lines were organized. Within 3 days the mightiest fleet the Velari had ever assembled was ready to move. Zareth stood on the bridge of the dominant will as the fleet prepared to enter hyperspace. 200 warships arranged in perfect formation, each one capable of devastating a continent. Together they could crack a planet in half. He thought of the council speaker's warning. Human ships are special. He thought of the old Kororan story. 500 ships and none return. Doubt flickered in his mind for just a moment, then he crushed it. Velari had never lost a war. They would not start now. All ships, he commanded, enter hyperspace. Destination New Carthage. The stars stretched into lines of light as the fleet jumped. Behind them the Galactic Council world of Thesser Prime grew small and disappeared. In the observation deck of the council building, Ambassador Tellus watched the Velari fleet vanish. His aide, a young Quarren barely a century old, stood beside him. Will they survive? The aide asked. Tellus was quiet for a long time. Some of them, the humans, are not cruel. They do not destroy when they can simply defeat. Then why do you look so sad? The old ambassador turned away from the viewport. His ancient eyes held the weight of centuries. Because I have seen this before. Young species full of pride and hunger. They see the humans and think they see weakness. They do not understand that humans chose to appear weak. They do not understand that for 300 years, while the rest of us built empires and fought wars, the humans built something else. What did they build? Tellus did not answer directly. Instead, he began walking toward the exit. His voice drifted back to his aide. Like a prophecy, the Velari will learn. They always learn, but they always learn too late. Outside the viewport, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere in the void between worlds, 200 warships raced toward a destiny their commander could not imagine, and on a small blue-green planet called Earth, humans went about their lives, working, playing, raising their children, building their future. They had been warned that the Velari were coming. They were not afraid. New Carthage hung in space like a jewel against black velvet. Blue oceans covered most of its surface. Green continents spread across the northern hemisphere. White clouds drifted lazily over cities that sparkled with light even from orbit. 3 million humans called this world home. The Velari fleet emerged from hyperspace. Perfect formation. 200 warships materialized in an instant there. Weapons already powered and ready. Supreme Commander Zareth stood at the center of his bridge, his 4 eyes fixed on the planet below. Scan the system, he ordered. Find their defenses. His tactical officers worked quickly. Data streamed across their screens. Zareth waited with growing impatience. Report, the lead tactical officer hesitated. Supreme Commander, our scans show minimal military presence. Orbital stations appear to be civilian communication satellites, weather monitoring, transportation hubs, and their fleet. Another pause. We detect 6 vessels between us and the planet. Zareth blinked. 6, yes. Supreme Commander, 6 ships standard. Human design, small vessels, no significant weapon signatures. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Zorath silenced it with a sharp look. He moved to the main viewport and stared at the tiny shapes floating between his armada. And New Carthage, 6 ships against 200. Either the humans were insane or they knew something the Vithari did not. Open a communication channel, Zorath commanded. Let us speak with these brave fools. The screen flickered. A human face appeared, a woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and calm brown eyes that showed no fear. She wore a simple uniform without medals or decorations. Behind her, Zorath could see a bridge that seemed almost casual compared to the military precision of his own vessel. This is Captain Elelina Vance of the United Earth Defense Vessel Meridian, the woman said. Her voice was pleasant, almost friendly. You have entered protected human space. How may we assist you? Zorath stared at her. Assist us? Yes. Your fleet seems to have arrived in considerable force. I assume there might be an emergency. Captain Vance tilted her head slightly. Are you lost? We would be happy to provide navigational data if you have drifted off course. For a moment, Zor was speechless. His officers exchanged confused glances. Was this human mocking them, or was she simply too foolish to understand the situation? I am Supreme Commander Zorath of the Villari Dominion, he growled. I have not drifted off course. I have come to claim this world for our empire. Ah, Captain. Vance nodded slowly. I see. That is unfortunate. Unfortunate for you. Perhaps you are outnumbered, outgunned. Your planet has no defenses capable of stopping us. Zorath spread his arms wide. I will be generous, human. You have 1 hour to begin evacuation. Any humans who wish to leave may do so without interference. Those who remain will become subjects of the Villari Dominion. He expected panic, pleading, perhaps defiance, followed quickly by surrender. Instead, Captain Vance simply sighed. Supreme Commander, I am required by law to inform you of certain facts. She spoke like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. Under United Earth Defense Protocol 7, you are entering protected space. Our ships are not standard vessels. The technology we carry is classified, but I am authorized to tell you that engagement would be inadvisable. Inadvisable? Zorath laughed. You have 6 ships. I have 200. What could 6 ships possibly do? Quite a lot. Actually, Captain Vance's expression remained calm. I am asking you sincerely to turn around, go home, report to your government that human space is not available for conquest. No one needs to be hurt today. Zorath's laughter died. Something in the human's voice bothered him. She was not bluffing. She was not pretending to be brave. She genuinely believed that 6 small ships could stop his entire fleet. You are either mad or foolish, he said finally. Perhaps both. Perhaps, Captain Vance smiled sadly, or perhaps you have not been given all the information you need to make a wise decision. The Galactic Council knows what human ships can do. They chose not to tell you. I wonder why. Communication line went silent. Zora stared at the blank screen for a long moment. His bridge crew waited for orders. Supreme Commander, his second in command ventured. What are your orders? Zor shook off his unease. The human was playing games, trying to create doubt where none should exist. It was a clever tactic for someone so badly outnumbered. But tactics could not change reality. All ships advance, he ordered. Formation. Delta weapons ready. We will give them one final chance to surrender before we demonstrate what happens to those who defy the Bellari. The fleet began to move, 200 warships gliding forward like predators closing on wounded prey. 6 human vessels remained exactly where they were. They did not retreat. They did not raise shields. They simply waited. Supreme Commander, I am detecting unusual energy readings from the human ships. Zorath turned to his science officer. Explain. I cannot. Supreme Commander, the energy signatures do not match any known technology. Our sensors are having difficulty even classifying what we are seeing. The officer's scales had gone pale. It is as if the ships are not entirely present in normal space. Not present. Zor moved to the science station and studied the readouts himself. The data made no sense. The human ships registered on sensors, but their signatures flickered and shifted in ways that should have been impossible. A cloaking device. No, Supreme Commander, cloaking devices hide ships' presence. These ships are visible, but the readings suggest they exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. The science officer looked up with fear in his eyes. I do not know what this means. Zorath did not know either, but he had committed to this course. His fleet was watching. His empire was watching. He could not show weakness. Now continue the advance. All ships prepared to fire on my command. Human vessels grew larger in that viewport. They were elegant in their simplicity, smooth hulls without visible weapons, no armor plating, no shield generators. They looked like civilian transports, not warships. Captain Vance's face appeared on the screen. Again, she had not been asked to communicate. She had simply opened the channel. Supreme Commander, I have done everything I can to prevent this. My conscience is clear. Her voice carried no anger, only resignation. I am required to inform you that everything that follows will be recorded for the Galactic Archive. Future species will see what happens here today. I hope they learn from it. Learn what? Zorath demanded. Learn that the Velari cannot be stopped. Learn that resistance is futile. No. Captain Vance shook her head slowly. Learn that we gave you every chance. Learn that we did not want this. She took a deep breath. Activate Protocol 7. All vessels prepare for engagement. The communication cut off. Zorath watched the 6 ships. For a moment nothing happened. Then slowly the vessels began to glow. It was not the glow of weapons charging or shields activating. It was something else entirely. The ship seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was uncertain about their existence. Supreme Commander, the energy readings are off the scale. Our sensors cannot fire. Zorath commanded. All ships fire. Everything. 200 warships unleash their fury. Plasma bolts by the thousands. Missiles by the hundreds. Energy beams capable of cutting through the strongest armor known to galactic science. The void between the fleets filled with light and death racing toward those 6 impossible vessels. The barrage hit and nothing happened. Zorath watched in disbelief as every weapon simply vanished when it reached the human ships. Plasma bolts did not splash against shields. Missiles did not detonate against holes. They just ceased to exist, as if they had fallen into holes in the universe itself. Report, he screamed. What is happening? His tactical officers were panicking. Their screens showed impossible data. Direct hits that registered no impact. weapons that disappeared from sensors. Mid-flight, the 6 human ships sat, motionless and undamaged, still glowing. With that strange light, Supreme Commander, I believe I understand. The science officer's voice was barely a whisper. The human ships are not protected by shields. They exist in a different dimensional phase. They are partially outside our reality. Our weapons cannot touch them because in a very real sense, they are not entirely here. Before Zoreth could respond, the human ships moved. They did not fly. They did not accelerate. They simply appeared in new positions instantly, as if the space between points meant nothing to them. One moment they were far away. The next moment they were among the Velari fleet, passing through formations like ghosts through walls. And then the real nightmare began. Ship by ship, the Velari fleet went dark. Engines failed, weapons powered down. Life support continued, but everything else simply stopped working. The human vessels moved through the armada like surgeons, disabling each warship with precision that bordered on contempt. 12 minutes, that was all it took. 200 of the mightiest warships the Velari had ever built, reduced to floating metal. 12 minutes, Zor stood on his darkened bridge, emergency lights casting red shadows across his face. His crew sat at dead consoles. His fleet drifted helpless in the void. And on the main screen, somehow still functioning, Captain Alina Vance looked at him with eyes full of pity. Your crews are alive, she said quietly. Your ships can be repaired. This is your one warning, Supreme Commander. Take your fleet, go home. Tell your people that human space is not for conquest. Zoras's voice emerged as a croak. What are you? Captain Vance considered the question for a long moment. We are what you forced us to become, she said. Finally, 300 years ago we learned that the universe was dangerous and that powerful species preyed upon the weak. We decided that we would never be prey. She leaned forward slightly. Go home. Supreme Commander, do not come back. Next time we meet, I may not be able to guarantee your survival. The screen went dark. Zor stood alone in the red emergency light, surrounded by the ruins of his ambitions. Outside, 6 small human ships turned and glided back toward New Carthage. They did not hurry. They did not celebrate. They simply returned to their positions as if defending a planet against 200 warships was nothing more than a minor interruption in their day. In the silence of his crippled flagship, Supreme Commander Zoreth began to understand why the Galactic Council had been afraid. 3 days had passed since the battle that was not a battle. The Velari fleet still drifted in the space around New Carthage, their ships dark and silent. Emergency power kept the crews alive. Recycled air and water rations sustained them, but they could not move. They could not communicate with home. They could only wait. Supreme Commander Zoreth had not slept. He sat in his command chair on the darkened bridge of the dominant will, staring at nothing. His officers moved quietly around him, checking systems that did not work, monitoring screens that showed only static. No one spoke to him. No one knew what to say. On the 3rd day, the human ships returned. They did not approach with weapons armed. They did not demand surrender. They simply took positions around the crippled fleet and waited. Then once again, Captain Alina Vance appeared on the screen. Supreme Commander, she said, I hope you have had time to think. Zor looked up slowly, his 4 eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. His scales had lost their shine. He looked like a creature defeated in ways that went beyond the military. "What do you want?" he asked. "To talk." Captain Vance's voice was gentle. "The Galactic Council has requested a formal explanation of what happened here. Under treaty law, we are required to provide one. You are part of that explanation. You want me to admit my defeat too? Humiliate myself before the galaxy? No." The human captain shook her head. "I want to give you understanding what happened. Here will be recorded in the Galactic Archive. Future species will study it. Future commanders will learn from it. I would rather they learn the right lessons." Zorath laughed bitterly. "And what lessons would those be?" "That humans are invincible, that resistance is futile, that mercy exists." Captain Vance leaned forward. "Supreme Commander, you brought 200 warships to conquer my world. You threatened 3 million innocent people. You ignored every warning we gave you, and you are still alive. Your crews are still alive. Your ships can be repaired." She paused to let those words sink in. "In the entire history of the Velari Dominion, how many times have you shown such mercy to your enemies?" Zora had no answer. The Velari did not show mercy, they showed strength. Mercy was weakness. Mercy was an invitation for enemies to strike again. That was the law of the universe as he understood it. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why did you not destroy us? We came to conquer you. We came to enslave your people. Any other species would have reduced us to atoms." "Yes, they would have." Captain Vance nodded. "And that is why humans are different." The screen shifted. Instead of the captain's face, Zor saw images. Earth as it had looked centuries ago. Blue oceans, green forests, cities that rose toward the sky, and then other images, darker ones, mushroom clouds, burning cities, mass graves, wars that had nearly destroyed the human species not once but many times. "We know what destruction looks like." Captain Vance's voice continued over the images. "We have done terrible things to each other. We have built weapons capable of ending all life on our world. We came within moments of using them. More than once, the images changed. Again, now Zorath saw something different. Scientists working in laboratories, engineers building strange machines, ships being constructed in orbital facilities. Their designs unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 300 years ago, we discovered that we were not alone in the universe. We learned that the galaxy was filled with species who conquered and destroyed species like yours. There was no accusation in her voice, only truth. We had a choice to make. We could become like them. We could build the largest fleet, conquer the most worlds, and prove that we were the strongest predators in existence. The images showed something else now. Children playing in parks, families eating together, artists creating beautiful things, normal life continuing without fear. Or we could choose a different path. We could refuse to become monsters. We could focus all our energy not on conquest but on protection, on making ourselves so secure that no one would ever be able to threaten us again. The screen returned to Captain Vance's face. For 300 years, Supreme Commander, humanity has worked toward one goal, not building the biggest fleet, not conquering the most territory. We built the most advanced technology the galaxy has ever seen. We cracked dimensional phasing, temporal shielding, spatial folding. We learned to step outside normal space-im itself. Zora thought of his weapons vanishing as they reached the human ships. He thought of those vessels appearing beside his own without crossing the distance between them. He thought of his entire fleet being disabled in 12 minutes by 6 small ships. Your vessels exist partially outside reality, he said. Slowly, that is why our weapons could not touch them. Yes, our ships phase between dimensional states. When threatened, they shift just enough that conventional weapons pass through them. Like light through glass, Captain Vance smiled slightly. We did not invent better shields, Supreme Commander. We made shields unnecessary. And your weapons, how did you disable my fleet? Without firing a shot, our ships can project that phase field outward. We did not destroy your systems, we simply shifted them slightly out of normal space. They still exist, they are just not connected to reality in the usual way. She made a small gesture. Our engineers can reverse the process. Your ships will function again. But we wanted you to understand what you were facing. First, Zora stood slowly from his command chair. His legs felt weak. Everything he believed about power and conquest and strength was crumbling around him. The Galactic Council knew. He said they knew what your ships could do. They learned 60 years ago. Kree warlord named Varex made the same mistake you did. Captain Vance's expression grew serious. 500 ships. Supreme Commander, we disabled every one of them. We sent the crews home with a message, and for 60 years no one has been foolish enough to test us again. Until now. Zoreth moved to the viewport. Outside he could see one of the human ships floating nearby. So small, so simple in appearance, so utterly devastating in capability. Why do you not conquer? He asked without turning around. With this technology, you could rule the galaxy. No one could stop you. You could have everything. The question hung in the air for a long moment. We could, Captain Vance admitted. We have thought about it some. Humans have even argued for it. Why should we be passive when we have the power to shape the galaxy according to our values? And your answer, my answer, is that power corrupts. My answer is that the moment we used our strength for conquest, we would become exactly what we hate. We would be no different from the Velari or the Kree warlords or any of the empires that have risen and fallen throughout galactic history. She paused. We choose to be better than that. Not because we are weak, because we are strong enough to make a different choice. Zareth turned to face the screen. And what choice do you offer me? Now, the same choice we always offer. Captain Vance stood up from her chair. Go home, Supreme Commander. Tell your people what you saw here. Tell them that human space is not for conquest, not because we are too strong to defeat, though we are, but because we do not want to be your enemies. You would just let us leave after we tried to conquer your world. Yes, we will repair your ships. We will provide supplies for your journey home. We will not demand reparations or punishment. Zoreth could not understand. In his entire career he had never encountered anything like this. Enemies were destroyed or subjugated. That was the natural order. That was how power worked. What do you gain from this? He demanded. What is the purpose of showing mercy to your enemies? Captain Vance smiled. It was a warm expression without mockery or superiority. Hope, Supreme Commander. We gain hope. She sat back down in her chair. Every species in this galaxy has The potential to grow, to change, to become better than they are. The Velari are not evil. You are young and aggressive and ambitious, but you are not beyond redemption. By showing you mercy today, we plant a seed. Maybe you will ignore it. Maybe you will hate us anyway, but maybe someday you will understand what that there is another way to be powerful, that strength does not have to mean cruelty, that you can be the strongest species in any room and still choose kindness. Communication channel closed. Zorath stood in silence. Around him his officers were watching. They had heard everything. They had seen their supreme commander, the greatest military leader of their generation, reduced to a confused student by a human who commanded 6 ships. Supreme Commander, his second-in-command asked quietly, "What are your orders?" Zorath closed his eyes. He thought of his fleet, defeated without a single Velari death. He thought of Captain Vance's offer to repair their ships, to send them home without punishment. He thought of the question that would haunt him for the rest of his life: why do you not conquer? When he opened his eyes, something had changed in them. "Contact the human vessel," he said slowly. "Tell them we accept their terms. We will return home." And then, Supreme Commander, Zor moved to his command chair and sat down heavily. "And then we have much to think about." Outside the viewport, the human ships waited patiently. They had won a victory today, but not the kind measured in destroyed enemies or conquered territory. They had won something much more valuable. They had introduced doubt into the mind of a conqueror. It was only a seed. It might never grow, but sometimes seeds planted in the harshest soil produced the strongest trees. Captain Alina Vance watched the Velari flagship from her bridge. She saw the confusion in their movements, the uncertainty in their communications. She had been doing this job for 20 years. She had faced pirates and warlords and aggressive empires. She had disabled thousands of ships without ever destroying one, and she had learned that the greatest weapon was not the ability to kill, but the ability to make your enemies question themselves. "Captain," her first officer asked, "do you think they will learn?" Elilina considered the question as she watched the Velari fleet preparing to leave. "Some of them will," she said finally. "Some of them always do. That is why we do this, not to defeat our enemies, but to give them the chance to become something else. And if they do not, if they come back with more ships," Alina smiled, "then we will be here and we will give them another chance, as many chances as it takes." The first officer nodded slowly. "That seems like a lot of patience for species that want to destroy us." "Yes, it is." Elilina turned away from the viewport. "But patience is something we have plenty of, and it has saved more lives than all the weapons ever built." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere in the darkness, a Velari commander was beginning a journey that he did not yet understand, a journey from conqueror to something else entirely. It would take time, it would take patience, but the humans had learned long ago that some victories could not be rushed. Some victories had to grow. The journey home took 17 days, 17 days of silence and shame as the crippled Velari fleet limped back through hyperspace with human-repaired engines. 17 days for Supreme Commander Zorath to sit in his quarters and think about everything he had witnessed. True to their word, the humans had fixed every ship. They had provided supplies, medical assistance, even entertainment files for crews who had nothing to do during the long voyage. They had treated their enemies like guests, like friends. It made no sense. On the 8th day, Zorath requested a private communication channel with Captain Vance. He did not know why. Perhaps he wanted to understand. Perhaps he simply needed someone to talk to who was not terrified of him. The human captain accepted his request without question. Supreme Commander, she said when her face appeared on his screen, I was wondering when you would call. You were expecting me. I have done this before. The silence always breaks eventually. She smiled slightly. What questions have you been carrying? Zorath had prepared many questions during those 8 days, but only one seemed to matter now. Tell me about humanity, he said. Not your technology, not your military. Tell me who you are, why you are the way you are. Captain Vance considered this for a moment, then she nodded. It is a long story, but we have time. She began to speak. She told him about Earth and its violent history, wars that lasted generations, weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash, hatred that divided humans against each other based on skin color, religion, nationality, ideology. She did not hide anything. She did not pretend that humans were naturally peaceful or good. We were like you once, she admitted, aggressive, territorial, convinced that the strong had the right to rule the weak. We built empires that stretched across our world. We enslaved each other. We committed terrible crimes in the name of progress and civilization. What changed? We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. Captain Vance's eyes grew distant. There were moments when we stood on the edge of total extinction, moments when our leaders held weapons that could end all life on Earth and seriously considered using them, moments when hate and fear almost consumed everything we had built. But you survived barely, and each time we survived, we learned something. She leaned forward. We learned that aggression has limits, that conquest creates enemies who will eventually rise against you, that the cycle of violence only ends when someone chooses to break it. Zorath listened as she continued. She told him about the generations of humans who had worked to build a better world, scientists who developed technologies to heal instead of destroy, leaders who chose negotiation over war, ordinary people who refused to hate their neighbors despite every reason to do so. It took centuries, Captain Vance said, and we still are not perfect. We still have anger and fear and prejudice, but we learn to recognize those things for what they are. We learn to choose differently. And when you discovered the galaxy, when you learned that other species were violent and dangerous, we had a decision to make. Captain Vance stood and moved to her viewport. We could have abandoned everything we had learned. We could have said that the universe was too dangerous for idealism, and that survival required becoming predators. That would have been the logical choice. Perhaps it was certainly the easy choice. She turned back to face the screen. But we decided that if we abandoned our principles the moment they became inconvenient, then they were never really principles at all. They were just comfortable illusions. She sat back down. So we made a different decision. We would hold on to our values. We would refuse to become conquerors. We would protect ourselves without becoming monsters, and we would spend every resource we had on making that possible. Your ships, Zora said, your technology. It was all built for defense. Yes, for 300 years, our best minds worked on one problem: how do you protect yourself from aggression without becoming aggressive yourself? How do you remain peaceful while surrounded by predators? You made yourselves untouchable. We made ourselves safe. Captain Vance smiled. There is a difference. We never developed planet-destroying weapons. We never built armies designed for conquest. Every piece of technology in our ships exists for one purpose: to neutralize threats without killing, to protect without destroying. Zora thought about this. He thought about the Velari way built on conquest and domination. He thought about the species they had crushed, the worlds they had taken, the millions who had died in their wars of expansion. And he thought about his fleet defeated completely without a single death. Why did you tell me this? He asked finally. Why share your secrets with an enemy? Because you are not my enemy anymore. Captain Vance looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. You are confused and afraid and uncertain. You have just had everything you believe challenged. That makes you something much more valuable than an enemy. What a student. The word hung in the air between them. I do not understand. No, not yet, Captain. Vance smiled gently. But you will. That is the human way, Supreme Commander. We do not simply defeat our enemies. We try to teach them. We try to show them that there are other paths, better paths, and if they refuse to learn, then we wait. We give them time to think. We give them chances to grow. She shrugged. Sometimes it takes years, sometimes it takes generations, but eventually most species learn. The ones that do not, they destroy themselves without any help from us. The communication ended shortly after, but Zora found himself returning to it again and again during the remaining days of the journey. Each time he understood a little more. Each time some piece of his worldview shifted slightly. When the fleet finally arrived home, Zareth was a different person then. The one who had left, he did not know. Yet how different. He did not know what he would do with the questions that now filled his mind, but he knew that something fundamental had changed. The Velari High Command demanded explanations. They demanded to know how 200 ships had been defeated by 6. They demanded strategies for revenge, plans for rearmament, ways to develop technology that could match what the humans possessed. Zareth told them the truth. He told them about the ships that existed outside normal space, about weapons that vanished into dimensional folds, about a fleet disabled in 12 minutes without a single shot being fired in anger. And he told them about mercy. They could have destroyed us, he said to the gathered commanders. Every ship, every crew, they had the power to eliminate the Velari threat forever. Instead, they fixed our engines. They gave us supplies. They sent us home with nothing but our damaged pride. Why? One commander demanded. What do they gain from such weakness? Zoreth had asked the same question. Now finally he had an answer. It is not weakness. It is the greatest strength I have ever seen. He looked around the room at faces filled with confusion and anger. They do not fear us. They do not hate us. They pity us. They look at our empire built on conquest and blood, and they see children playing with dangerous toys. We are not children, another commander shouted. We are the Velari Dominion. We have conquered 12 systems, and they have made themselves invincible. Zarath's voice was quiet but firm. not to conquer, not to rule, simply to live. Without fear, while we were building armies, they were building something else entirely, something we cannot defeat with any weapon we possess. The room fell silent. They offered me a choice. Zareth continued, the same choice they offer every species they encounter. We can continue on our current path. We can keep conquering and fighting and dying. We can pretend that strength means cruelty and that power means domination, and eventually we destroy ourselves, as every aggressive empire in galactic history has destroyed itself. He paused. Or we can learn, we can grow, we can become something better than we are. A commander stood. His scales were flushed with rage. You speak of surrender. You speak of abandoning everything we are. Number Zoreth shook his head. I speak of evolution. I speak of recognizing that there are better ways to be strong. The humans showed me that. They showed me that the greatest victory is not destroying your enemies, but transforming them into something new. He looked around the room one last time. I do not know if our people can learn this lesson. I do not know if I can learn it fully myself, but I know that I saw something on that human ship, something I had never seen before in my entire career. What did you see? Zoreth smiled. Sadly, I saw a species that had every reason to destroy us and chose not to. I saw mercy given to those who did not deserve it. I saw strength expressed through restraint instead of violence. He turned and walked toward the door. I saw hope, and I realized that in all my years of conquest, I had never once offered that to anyone. The door closed behind him. In the conference room, the commanders looked at each other in confusion and anger. Some dismissed Zoreth's words as the ramblings of a broken man. Others were not so sure. They had seen the records. They had watched the footage of 6 small ships defeating 200 warships without firing a shot. They had seen the impossible. Now they had to decide what to do with it. Outside the building, Zoreth looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, past countless stars, a small blue planet circled an ordinary sun. 3 million people lived on New Carthage. Billions more lived on Earth and its other colonies. They went about their lives without fear. They raised children. They built things. They dreamed of the future, and they waited patiently for the rest of the galaxy to catch up with them. Zoreth did not know if his people would listen. He did not know if he had the strength to chain himself, let alone an entire empire. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had been given a chance that he had never given to any of his own enemies, and he would not waste it. 50 years had passed since the battle at New Carthage. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Velari Dominion, once feared across a dozen systems, no longer existed as a conquering empire. The aggressive military government had collapsed into civil war just 3 years after Zoreth's return. Factions had fought for control. Worlds had declared independence. For a time it seemed that the Velari would destroy themselves entirely. Then the human ships arrived. Not to conquer, not to take advantage. They came with food and medicine and engineers. They helped rebuild cities that Velari factions had destroyed. They treated wounded soldiers from both sides of the civil war. They asked for nothing in return. It was the most confusing thing the Velari had ever experienced. Slowly, painfully, a new generation rose to power. Velari who had grown up hearing stories about the 6 ships that defeated 200 Velari who had eaten food delivered by human transports during the famine years, Velari who had begun to ask the same question that Supreme Commander Zorath had asked half a century before: why do they help us? What do they gain? Why do they not conquer when they so easily could? And slowly, painfully, they began to understand. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked the same as it had 50 years ago, the same crystal pillars, the same floating screens, the same circular tiers of seats rising toward the ceiling, but the beings who filled those seats were different now. The archivist still flickered with ancient wisdom, the Kororan still traded information across the stars, the CFT still honored their warrior traditions. But among them sat new delegations, species that had joined the council in recent decades, species that had learned, as the Velari were learning, that there were other ways to be strong. At the central platform stood an old Velari. His scales had faded from dark purple to pale gray. His 4 eyes were clouded with age, but he stood straight and proud as he faced the assembled representatives. "I am Ambassador Zorath of the Velari Republic," he announced. His voice was softer than it had been half a century ago, but it still carried across the Great Hall. "I come before this council with a formal request." The council speaker rose. She was human, the first human to ever hold that position. She had earned it not through conquest, but through decades of patient diplomacy and service to every species in the galaxy. "Ambassador Zorath," she said, "the council recognizes you. Please state your request." Zorath looked around the chamber. He saw faces that would have been enemies 50 years ago. He saw species that his people had once dreamed of conquering, and he saw something else: curiosity, interest, maybe even hope. 50 years ago, I stood in this very hall, he began. I was Supreme Commander of the Velari Dominion. I came to demand permission to conquer human space. Council warned me against it. I did not listen. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Everyone knew this story. It was taught in schools across the galaxy. The lesson of New Carthage, the moment when everything changed. I led 200 warships against 6 human vessels. I expected victory. I received education. Instead, Zorath smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for him in his younger years. The humans showed me something that day. They showed me that strength does not have to mean destruction, that power does not have to mean cruelty, that you can be the mightiest force in the galaxy and still choose mercy. He paused. I did not understand at first. None of us did. The Velari were raised to believe that conquest was natural, that the strong existed to rule the weak, that mercy was just another word for weakness. And now, the council speaker asked, "Now I know better." Zorath straightened his old shoulders. "The Velari Republic formally requests admission to the Terran Accords." Another murmur, louder this time. The Terran Accords were the greatest alliance in galactic history. 30 species bound together by common principles, not conquest, not domination, mutual protection, shared growth, the belief that every species deserved the chance to become better than it was. "This is not a request we make lightly," Zorath continued. "We know that we have much to answer for. We know that the wounds we inflicted on the galaxy will take generations to heal. But we also know that healing is possible. We have Seen it, we have experienced it. He looked directly at the council speaker. Humans came to our worlds when we were tearing ourselves apart. They brought food when our people were starving, medicine when our children were dying. They rebuilt cities that we had destroyed in our own foolishness. They asked for nothing, they demanded nothing, they simply helped. The old Valari's voice grew thick with emotion. I have spent 50 years trying to understand why. Why would a species with the power to crush us instead choose to save us? Why would they invest so much in people who had tried to conquer them? He blinked his four clouded eyes. I finally understand. They were not saving us, they were investing in us. They believed that we could change. They believed that the Valari, for all our violence and aggression, had the potential to become something better. And they were willing to wait, to be patient, to give us chance after chance, until we finally learned. The council speaker nodded slowly. The Terran Accords are not about power, Ambassador. They are not about military alliance or economic advantage. They are about choice. Every species that joins agrees to one simple principle: protect the weak, forgive the fallen, never strike first. I understand, Zora said. The Valari accept these principles, not because we are forced to, but because we have learned that they are right. The vote was unanimous. The Valari Republic was admitted to the Terran Accords. 31 species now stood together, bound not by conquest but by shared values. After the ceremony, Zoreth walked through the corridors of the council building. He was tired. His old body ached, but he felt something he had never felt as a conqueror. Peace. A young Belthari woman fell into step beside him. Her scales were bright purple, the color of youth and health. Her eyes were sharp and curious. She was a student chosen to accompany the ambassador on this historic journey. Ambassador, she said respectfully, may I ask you something? Of course. You were the greatest military commander our people ever produced. You conquered 12 systems. You were feared across the galaxy. She hesitated. Do you regret becoming something else? Zoreth stopped walking. He looked at the young woman, saw the future of his people in her curious eyes. Let me tell you a story, he said. 50 years ago, I sat on the bridge of the mightiest warship our people had ever built. I commanded 200 vessels. I had the power to devastate worlds, and I was terrified. The young woman looked confused, terrified. Always, constantly, because I knew that there was always someone stronger, always someone with more ships, better weapons, a larger army. In the world of conquest, there is no safety, only temporary advantage. He started walking again, slower now. When the humans defeated us, I expected death or slavery or some other punishment that fit the logic of conquest. Instead, they fixed our ships and sent us home. They trusted us with our own freedom. They believed we could be better. He stopped at a window that looked out over the city below. That night, for the first time in my adult life, I was not afraid because I finally understood something. Humans were not powerful because they could destroy anyone. They were powerful because they did not need to. They had built something beyond conquest. They had built security. He turned to face the young woman. Do I regret becoming something else? No, I regret all the years I spent as something less. I regret the lives lost in wars that did not need to happen. I regret the suffering my conquest caused. His old Eyes met her young ones, but I do not regret learning, and I do not regret becoming the person who could stand before the council today and ask to join something greater than empire, that is, the gift the humans gave me, the chance to change. The young woman nodded. Slowly. She did not fully understand. Yet but she would, they all would. Eventually, outside the window a small human ship descended toward a landing pad. It was the same type of vessel that had defeated 200 warships 50 years ago. Elegant, simple, seemingly harmless. Human child ran across the spaceport. Below, chasing some kind of pet. Laughing, playing, completely unaware of the history being made in the building. Above, Ambassador, the young woman said quietly, how can they be so powerful and so ordinary at the same time? Zorath watched the child play, because power was never the point, he said, living well was, they just made sure no one could stop them from doing that. Across the galaxy, the warning was still given. To aggressive young species, human ships are special, you will find out why. But more and more the warning was unnecessary. More and more young species listened, not out of fear, out of respect. And somewhere on a small blue planet, circling an ordinary star, humans continued doing what they had always done, working, playing, raising their children, building their future, waiting patiently for the rest of the galaxy to understand what they had learned long ago, that the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, it was the wisdom to choose something better.